Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something today that's going to open your eyes. You ever wonder what men really fear when it comes to you? I mean, really fear? See, most people think men are fearless, tough, unshaken. But that's just the surface. Deep down, every man's got something he's scared of. And 9 times out of 10, it's you. Yeah, you heard me right, you. When a man starts to care about a woman, when his heart begins to open, something deep inside of him shifts. For most men, it's a feeling they've spent years learning to suppress or avoid. It's not because men are incapable of emotion. Far from it. It's because society has taught them that vulnerability is a weakness. It's a mindset that tells men from a very young age that to show emotion is to be soft, to be less than what a real man should be. Men are often expected to hold it all together, to always appear strong, steady, and in control. And let's be honest, the world can sometimes give them a hard time when they show anything less than that exterior. But here's the reality. When a man starts to care deeply, when he begins to allow himself to feel, he steps into unknown territory. His emotions no longer feel like something he can just push away or ignore. Suddenly they're real, they're raw, and they matter. That's when he's most vulnerable, and that's the moment that can be terrifying. Think about it. When a man truly cares about a woman, his mind is filled with thoughts of how to protect her, how to make her happy, how to show up for her in every possible way. The level of investment he places in the relationship is so much more than just the surface. It's deeper than the small gestures, the dates, or the compliments. It's his time, his heart, and his energy, all of it directed toward her. And in that moment, his vulnerability is tied to the very core of who he is. It's one of the biggest fears a man faces because vulnerability is often seen as the point of no return. When a man lets his guard down, he exposes himself to potential hurt, rejection, and emotional devastation. And that fear of getting hurt, that can be paralyzing. If a man truly opens up and allows himself to feel deeply for a woman, he puts himself in a position where his emotions are no longer just his. They're intertwined with hers. His happiness, his peace, his sense of well-being now relies in part on her actions, her thoughts, and her feelings. That's a lot of pressure. And that's why many men avoid allowing themselves to get too close because they know how vulnerable it makes them. But vulnerability isn't just about the fear of getting hurt. It's also about the fear of losing control. Men like to feel in control. It's natural, not just in relationships, but in all areas of life. But love, true love, doesn't always fit into neat, controlled boxes. When a man truly falls for someone, the unpredictability of emotions becomes apparent. He can't always predict how things will unfold, and he can't control how deeply he might get involved. The fear of losing control over his emotions, of not knowing what comes next or where the relationship might lead, becomes a real source of anxiety for many men. It's not just the possibility of pain, it's the uncertainty. When men care, they begin to fear being too open, too emotional. The old idea that men should be stoic runs deep in them. They've been told time and time again that showing emotion makes them weak, that it undermines their masculinity. And as much as they may want to embrace their emotions, The conditioning they've undergone in society creates an internal struggle. The fear of being perceived as weak, of being judged or criticized for expressing feelings, keeps many men from opening up fully to the woman they care about. That's why when they meet someone who inspires them to break through that wall, to let their guard down and be vulnerable, it's a big deal. It's not easy, it's not simple, and it's not something most men are comfortable with. But when it happens, when they find themselves genuinely caring and opening up to a woman, it's a powerful thing. For a man, being able to be vulnerable with someone means he trusts them. And trust is one of the most precious things a man can offer. It's the very foundation of a relationship. But that trust also makes him exposed. So yes, men fear vulnerability. They fear the loss of control over their emotions. They fear being too open and too real. They fear the rawness that comes with caring so deeply, because it takes them to a place they can't always predict or control. It's a fear that not only arises from the possibility of emotional hurt, but also from the vulnerability of being seen, truly seen by someone else. For a man, this is the ultimate test. And when a man can finally overcome that fear, when he can allow himself to feel, it's a moment of profound growth. But let's not mistake this fear for weakness. It takes an incredible amount of strength to open up like that, to trust someone enough to let them see the parts of you that society tells you to hide. It's a fear that all men grapple with, whether they admit it or not, and it shapes the way they navigate relationships. A man's sense of self-worth is often tied to how much he feels he can provide, not just financially, but emotionally, socially, and in every way that society defines as successful. The pressure to be enough is a constant battle for many men, and it's a fear that's deeply ingrained in their psyche. From a young age, society teaches boys to grow up strong, independent, and capable of taking care of themselves and others. But here's the thing. As they grow into men, that expectation doesn't fade. It intensifies, and that constant pressure to be enough becomes a source of anxiety, self-doubt, and fear that never truly disappears. When a man is in a relationship, the feeling of not being enough becomes even more pronounced. It's not just about money or success or providing in the traditional sense. It's about being emotionally available, being there for the person they care about, offering support, affection, and love. And yet, for many men, the fear of not being enough can make them feel inadequate, no matter how much they try or how hard they work. The bar seems to always be just a little bit higher than they can reach. This constant battle with their own sense of worth can lead to feelings of frustration and insecurity, because no matter how much they achieve or give, it never feels like it's enough. When a man is with a woman who challenges him to grow, who encourages him to do better, who expects him to be more than just average, that fear is magnified. He feels that there's an expectation hanging over him that he has to meet, that he must rise to a level of greatness or risk being abandoned or seen as weak. He becomes afraid that his efforts won't be seen or appreciated, and the fear of failure can be paralyzing. It's not just about feeling insufficient in one area, like finances or appearance. It's about feeling like in every possible way he's not enough for her. This fear of inadequacy also comes from the comparison trap. A man often compares himself to other men, whether it's his friends, his colleagues, or even the idealized version of a man that society puts on a pedestal. The fear of being replaced by someone who seems to have it all together, who appears more successful, more confident, or more capable, is always lurking in the back of a man's mind. This comparison is never ending, and it can make him question whether he's truly measuring up. The pressure to live up to the image of the perfect man is overwhelming, and when that fear creeps in, he starts to feel like no matter how hard he works, he'll never reach that standard. For many men, the desire to provide and be enough extends beyond the financial or material aspects of life. It's about showing up as the man they think they should be. The protector, the provider, the emotionally strong partner. But the problem is, many men have been taught to suppress their feelings, to avoid showing vulnerability. They've been told that showing emotion is a sign of weakness, that asking for help or admitting fear is a flaw. But when he cares deeply for a woman, when he allows himself to open up to her, he fears that his own emotional limitations will somehow make him less than the man she needs, and that fear can eat away at his sense of self-worth, making him second-guess every decision he makes in the relationship. He worries about not being able to meet her expectations, not being able to give her what she needs, and not being able to live up to the image of the perfect man. That fear of not being enough can also make him overcompensate. Some men will push themselves harder than they need to, working extra hours, sacrificing their well-being, doing whatever they think is necessary to prove that they are enough. But often, this effort comes at the cost of their mental health, their relationships, and their own sense of fulfillment. The more they try to prove themselves, the further they may drift from their authentic self. The pressure becomes unbearable, and they start to question whether their partner truly sees them for who they are, or if they are simply a tool to fulfill some external expectation. This fear runs deep, and it's not something that a man can easily brush aside. It's a fear that stays with him no matter how successful he becomes or how much he achieves. It's always there in the back of his mind, nagging at him. Am I doing enough? Am I enough? It's a constant question that keeps many men awake at night, wondering if they will ever be able to reach that elusive standard of enough. And the worst part? Most men never truly express this fear out loud. They bottle it up, trying to be the strong, capable figure that society expects them to be. But inside, they're struggling with that very fear, the fear that they are never going to be enough. This is the internal battle that many men face every day. And it's a fear that can prevent them from fully showing up in relationships, from being emotionally available, and from experiencing true peace with who they are. Vulnerability is one of the most feared aspects of life for many men. Society has ingrained in them from an early age that to be a real man means to be tough, stoic, and unshakable. Men are raised to believe that showing emotion is a sign of weakness, and that to reveal any sign of vulnerability is to risk being judged as incapable or fragile. This societal expectation weighs heavily on men, shaping how they interact with the world and with the people around them, especially in relationships. From the time a boy starts growing up, he's taught that crying is for the weak, that showing fear is unacceptable, and that asking for help is a failure. So, as men get older, they internalize these lessons and build walls around their emotions. The result? a lifetime of suppressing feelings, hiding fears, and masking any signs of vulnerability. To many men, vulnerability is equated with danger, a risk they feel they cannot afford to take. But what happens when a man enters a relationship, especially one where deep emotional connection is expected? What happens when the walls they've spent years constructing to protect themselves start to crumble, and they are faced with the possibility of exposing their raw, unfiltered selves? The fear of vulnerability becomes even more intense because, for the first time, it's no longer just about personal weakness. It's about how much of themselves they're willing to share with another person. And that's a big deal. When a man falls for someone, he's opening up to the possibility of emotional injury. He is willingly stepping into a space where his heart, his fears, and his deepest thoughts could be judged, rejected, or hurt. This is an intensely scary experience, especially when the person he's sharing himself with doesn't yet understand the depth of the courage it takes for him to do so. In many ways, vulnerability in a relationship isn't just about being open, it's about risking rejection, misunderstanding, and emotional damage. It's about revealing the parts of himself he's kept hidden for so long. But here's where things get tricky. Men also know that without vulnerability, they can't truly connect. They may fear it, but deep down they understand that emotional openness is key to intimacy and trust. Yet the fear of being hurt or judged often holds them back, so they retreat, they shut down, and they hide behind their walls, even if they want to be more open. This creates an internal conflict. They want to be emotionally available, but their conditioning tells them to protect themselves from being exposed. It's a catch-22. For a man, the idea of allowing someone to see the parts of himself that are imperfect, that have been damaged, that are raw and unhealed, that is terrifying. It's not just about the fear of being hurt. It's about the fear of being seen as less than capable, less than perfect, less than what society says a man should be. The fear of vulnerability can even extend to the fear of being seen as weak or needy. These fears are not just psychological, they are embedded in the core of how men view themselves in relation to the world and the people they care about. And then there's the fear of failure that comes with being vulnerable. Many men are terrified that if they open up, they'll fail to meet expectations, either their partners or their own. They fear that if they allow themselves to be truly seen, their flaws and insecurities will overshadow their strengths. They fear that if they reveal too much of their emotions, they will no longer be seen as the strong, capable person they believe they must be. The idea of failing in this way, of not living up to an ideal, is crippling for a man. It's a vulnerability they would rather not face. This fear of vulnerability doesn't just affect relationships. It also impacts men's overall emotional health. When men bottle up their emotions and avoid being vulnerable, they often experience increased stress, anxiety, and loneliness. They struggle in silence, thinking they must shoulder their burdens alone because asking for support is seen as a sign of weakness. This only compounds the issue. The longer a man suppresses his emotions and hides his vulnerabilities, the more difficult it becomes to open up. Over time, this emotional suppression can lead to deeper problems, including depression and a sense of isolation. The fact that society still struggles with accepting emotional vulnerability in men makes this fear even more challenging. It's not just about personal discomfort, It's about the fear of societal rejection. The image of the strong, silent type persists, and men are pressured to embody that image at all costs. But in doing so, they lose the opportunity to fully experience the depth of connection that comes with vulnerability. They miss the chance to be truly seen, to be loved for who they are at their most authentic and raw. And perhaps most importantly, they miss the opportunity to grow, both emotionally and relationally. But what if we started to redefine vulnerability? What if it wasn't seen as a weakness, but as a strength? What if we celebrated the courage it takes for a man to open up, to show the parts of himself that are scared, unsure, or hurt? Imagine the kind of world we could create where vulnerability in men wasn't feared or hidden, but embraced and respected. That, my friends, is the kind of change we need if we are ever going to help men break free from the chains of emotional suppression and build the kind of genuine connections they truly desire. Men fear vulnerability because it's a risk of being hurt, of being judged, of being seen as weak. But in truth, vulnerability is the gateway to deeper love, greater connection, and true emotional freedom. The more we understand and accept that, the more we empower men to be their true, authentic selves. Rejection is one of the most primal fears that a man experiences, particularly when it comes to relationships. For many men, the thought of being rejected, whether in the form of a romantic relationship, friendship, or professional opportunity, sends a shockwave through their entire sense of self. Rejection challenges a man's identity, his value, and his place in the world. It's a fear that cuts deep, and it often lurks beneath the surface, causing anxiety and insecurity that many men struggle to articulate. For a man who deeply cares about a woman, the fear of rejection becomes amplified. When a man invests his time, his emotions, and his energy into someone, he becomes vulnerable to the possibility that all of his efforts may be met with disinterest or a no. In these moments, rejection feels personal. It's not just about a no to a date or a relationship. It feels like a rejection of who he is as a person. His fears of inadequacy, of not being enough, get triggered, and he questions his worth. This fear isn't just about not being chosen. It's about fearing that he, as an individual, isn't worthy of love, affection, or connection. The stakes are high when a man opens his heart to someone. He's not simply risking a fleeting disappointment. He's exposing his vulnerability, his emotions, and his most authentic self. And if the rejection comes, it can feel like a rejection of everything that makes him who he is. This makes the fear of rejection one of the most potent and paralyzing emotions for a man in relationships. It's important to understand that men often don't show how much rejection hurts them. While women may express their feelings openly, many men feel the need to conceal their pain in the face of rejection. They may mask their disappointment with humor, anger, or indifference. But underneath that facade, the sting of being rejected often lingers. Men are taught to man up, to suppress their emotions, and to carry on as though rejection doesn't hurt. But it does. The fear of being rejected by a woman, especially someone they care for deeply, can cause a man to question his own value. He might wonder if he's too much, too little, or simply not the right person. These questions arise from a deeply held fear that rejection means he isn't worthy, and it sends him into a spiral of self-doubt and insecurity. The fear of rejection is also closely tied to the fear of losing control. Men, generally speaking, prefer to feel in control of their environments, and their relationships are no exception. The more emotionally invested a man becomes in a relationship, the more he feels he has to protect that bond. Rejection feels like the loss of that control. It's the sudden, unexpected event that disrupts everything, leaving him feeling powerless and exposed. The unpredictability of rejection, the feeling of not knowing whether or not he will be accepted, can create an anxiety that prevents men from fully opening up or putting themselves out there. They fear that if they let their guard down and express their feelings, they risk being vulnerable to the pain of rejection. Moreover, the fear of rejection can cause many men to withdraw emotionally or avoid situations where rejection is a possibility. Instead of taking risks or pursuing opportunities that could lead to emotional connection or growth, some men choose to play it safe. They may avoid putting themselves in a position where they might face rejection altogether. This often leads to missed opportunities, whether it's in the form of love, career advancements, or personal growth. Men may talk themselves out of making that approach, asking someone out, or even expressing their true feelings, because the risk of rejection is simply too high. Another aspect of the fear of rejection is the way it affects a man's self-esteem. Men often tie their self-worth to how they are perceived by others, and when they face rejection, it can feel like a public failure. For a man, rejection can be a blow to his ego, as he's conditioned to believe that success is about being accepted, appreciated, and admired by others. When that validation is not given, it shakes the very foundation of his confidence. He might retreat into himself, questioning why he wasn't good enough or what he could have done differently. In this way, rejection is not just a personal experience. It's an identity crisis. It forces men to confront the things they've been taught to fear about themselves, their inadequacies, their imperfections, and the possibility that they may never measure up. The fear of rejection can also have long-term effects on how men approach relationships moving forward. If a man has been rejected repeatedly, whether in past relationships or in dating, it can lead to a fear of intimacy or commitment. He might start to avoid getting emotionally attached to others for fear of being hurt again. The emotional scars of rejection don't always heal quickly, and some men carry those wounds for a long time. They may build walls to protect themselves, telling themselves that they're better off being alone than risking the pain of another rejection. This can create a cycle of emotional distance, where a man is unwilling to open up or let someone in. Yet despite all of this, men still seek connection. They still want to be loved and valued. The fear of rejection may cause them to hesitate, to second-guess themselves, or to hold back, but deep down, they crave the kind of intimacy that comes with taking risks. In the face of rejection, many men learn to adapt. They learn how to cope with the sting and move on, but the fear never fully disappears. It remains a quiet companion in their relationships, always present, always reminding them of the vulnerability that comes with opening their hearts to someone else. The fear of rejection doesn't make a man weak, it makes him human. And it's a fear that, like many others, he learns to navigate one step at a time. The desire to protect is deeply embedded in the psyche of many men, and it goes beyond just the instinct to guard against physical harm. It's about emotional protection, social protection, and the need to ensure that those they care about feel safe, secure, and cared for. The idea of not being able to protect someone they love, whether it's a partner, family, or close friends, is a deep-rooted fear that many men grapple with throughout their lives. It's not always something that's openly discussed, but the fear of being unable to safeguard the people they love is powerful and often silently endured. For many men, protection isn't just a physical act. It's the emotional and psychological responsibility of being a rock, of being the one who can offer support, offer guidance, and be the person others rely on in times of difficulty. This belief is often shaped by societal expectations that men should always be strong, unshakable, and the ones who carry the weight of those they love. From a young age, boys are conditioned to believe that they must take on the role of the protector. This conditioning can create immense pressure, especially in relationships where the stakes feel high. When it comes to romantic relationships, this need to protect can be particularly intense. Men fear not being able to provide a sense of security for their partner, whether that means offering emotional support during tough times, being financially stable, or creating a safe space for them to express themselves. The idea of failing in any of these areas can be distressing. In a world where vulnerability is often viewed as weakness, the fear of not being able to protect someone emotionally becomes even more pronounced. Men fear that if they fail to show up when needed, if they fail to be strong or dependable in the eyes of their partner, they risk being seen as inadequate or unworthy of love. This fear isn't just about the fear of physical harm. It's about the emotional and psychological safety of a loved one. Men fear that they might not have the right words when their partner is going through a tough time, or that they won't be able to help them overcome their fears or worries. The thought of being powerless in these situations, of watching someone they care about suffer without being able to fix it, can be deeply For many men, this fear is tied to their own insecurities about not knowing how to be the perfect partner, how to offer the kind of protection and care that the person they love deserves in relationships. The fear of not being able to protect can also manifest in a fear of failure. If a man feels that he hasn't been able to provide the kind of protection his partner needs, he may start to question his worthiness as a partner. The fear of failure can drive him to work harder, to try to be more, but it can also lead to feelings of frustration and helplessness. The harder he tries to protect and support, the more pressure he may feel. When he falls short, it can leave him feeling like he's failed in his most important role. This internal struggle can lead to emotional stress and a sense of inadequacy that many men try to hide. But the fear of not being able to protect is not just an individual concern. It's something that many men carry from their past experiences. They may have witnessed their own fathers or male role models struggle with the inability to protect their families or loved ones. These experiences leave a lasting impression, creating an unconscious fear that they too will one day fail to fulfill that role. The fear of not being able to live up to the legacy of strength and protection that was passed down to them can feel overwhelming, especially in moments of vulnerability. As men grow older, this fear often extends beyond just romantic relationships. It touches every area of their lives, from career to friendships to family dynamics. In many cases, men feel that they must always be the one to hold things together, to provide stability and safety for those around them. But the reality is, no one can protect others all the time. Life is unpredictable, and it's impossible to shield others from every challenge or hurt they might face. But for many men, this knowledge doesn't lessen the fear. Instead, it exacerbates it as they struggle with the constant tension between their desire to protect and their understanding of their own limitations. This fear of not being able to protect also influences how men view their own emotional health. The constant pressure to be the protector can be mentally and physically exhausting. Men often carry their anxieties in silence, afraid that showing weakness will undermine their ability to take care of others. They feel that if they reveal their own vulnerabilities, they may not be seen as strong enough to protect those they love. So they push their own emotional needs aside, focusing instead on ensuring that everyone else is okay. But this ongoing emotional suppression can take a toll, leading to burnout, stress, and sometimes even resentment. Yet, despite this fear, men often don't allow themselves the grace to accept that they can't always protect others from everything. They carry the weight of this responsibility on their shoulders, believing that to be strong, they must be impenetrable. But true strength doesn't come from never showing weakness. It comes from acknowledging limitations and being okay with not having all the answers or solutions. The fear of not being able to protect will always be there, but in accepting that vulnerability is part of being human. Men can create a space for growth, healing, and deeper connections with the people they love. Men fear being judged in ways that many may not readily admit, but it is a powerful and pervasive fear that impacts how they behave, how they engage with others, and how they view themselves. From an early age, men are taught to uphold certain ideals of masculinity: strength, stoicism, confidence, and emotional control. These ideals often come with a strict set of societal expectations that men feel compelled to meet. The fear of being judged for falling short of these standards can create deep feelings of insecurity, anxiety, and self-doubt. It's a fear that, while often unspoken, shapes many aspects of their lives, particularly in social and romantic contexts. This fear of judgment often leads men to carefully curate how they present themselves to the world. They may feel the need to constantly project an image of success, capability, and emotional control, even when they're struggling internally. In public, they might avoid showing vulnerability or emotional distress, fearing that others will see them as weak or incapable. This can lead to a performance of masculinity where the true self is hidden behind a mask. The deeper the fear of judgment, the more energy a man may put into crafting this perfect image of himself. At its core, the fear of being judged is a fear of being rejected or deemed unworthy. Men are conditioned to believe that if they show any signs of weakness or imperfection, they risk being seen as less than in the eyes of others, whether it's in a professional setting, among friends, or within their personal relationships. There's a real concern that showing vulnerability, expressing emotions, or admitting faults will make them appear flawed, unfit, or less capable. And this fear isn't just about being judged by strangers. It's about being judged by the people whose opinions they value most: partners, family, and peers. In romantic relationships, the fear of being judged is often tied to the desire to be seen as the ideal partner. Men worry about being judged for not living up to the standards of their partner, whether it's in terms of emotional support, financial stability, or their overall role in the relationship. They fear that if they don't measure up, their partner might think less of them or even leave. This can create a sense of constant pressure to be perfect and to hide any flaws or imperfections. Instead of feeling free to be their authentic selves, men may feel they must perform or live up to an idealized version of themselves in order to be accepted and loved. The fear of judgment is also closely connected to the fear of failure. Men are often taught that success is measured by their ability to provide, to be competent, and to excel. Failing in any of these areas is seen as a direct reflection of their worth. They fear that if they fail or fall short, others will judge them harshly, which can lead to feelings of inadequacy and embarrassment. Whether it's a failed career move, a mistake in a relationship, or not living up to expectations, the fear of being judged for failure can be paralyzing. It can cause men to avoid taking risks, to suppress their true desires, and to play it safe rather than pursuing opportunities that might lead to growth or success. This fear of judgment also extends to how men manage their emotions. In a society that often teaches men to suppress their feelings and avoid showing weakness, the fear of being judged for expressing emotions can create a barrier to emotional intimacy. Men may worry that if they open up or reveal their true feelings, they will be judged as less masculine or too emotional. As a result, they may bottle up their feelings, fearing that if they express themselves, others will think less of them. This emotional suppression can lead to feelings of isolation, frustration, and even depression. The inability to be vulnerable, to show emotion, or to ask for help because of the fear of judgment can prevent men from forming deeper, more meaningful connections with others. In addition to personal relationships, men also fear judgment in their professional lives. The pressure to perform, to be successful, and to achieve is immense. Men often fear being judged for their failures, mistakes, or moments of vulnerability at work. In many professional environments, weakness is seen as a liability, and men feel the weight of having to always appear competent, confident, and in control. The fear of judgment in the workplace can lead men to avoid taking risks, to shy away from asking for help, and to conceal any struggles they might be facing. They fear that showing uncertainty or asking for assistance will reflect poorly on their abilities and jeopardize their professional reputation. The fear of judgment also affects men's self-esteem. When they feel that they are constantly under scrutiny, they can begin to internalize negative beliefs about themselves. They may start to doubt their worth, question their capabilities, or believe that they're not good enough to meet the expectations of others. This internalized judgment can lead to a cycle of self-criticism and insecurity, where the fear of being judged by others becomes internalized as a fear of judging themselves. As a result, men may become trapped in a constant loop of striving to meet external expectations while never feeling truly secure in who they are. Ultimately, the fear of being judged is a deeply ingrained fear that can influence many areas of a man's life. It's tied to societal pressures, personal insecurities, and the need for acceptance and approval. While men may not always voice this fear, it is a silent force that shapes how they interact with the world and with those they care about. It prevents them from embracing vulnerability, pursuing their true desires, and expressing themselves authentically. And in doing so, it creates barriers that limit their emotional and personal growth.